The Kelthid Empire's Grand Admiral Sixtal stood before the holographic display of a seemingly unremarkable solar system, his crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the soft blue light of distant stars. 3,000 years of uncontested expansion had made his species complacent, but none would dare suggest such a thing to his face. Their latest discovery, a backwater planet called Earth, barely warranted his attention. Another primitive species, he chittered to his war council, mandibles clicking in amusement. Their most advanced vessels haven't even left their own system. The assembled generals shared in his dismissive humor, their crystalline forms shimming with mirth. Send the standard ultimatum. I expect their surrender within their planetary rotation. On Earth, Commander Elena Torres stood in the United Earth Defense Force headquarters beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching the alien transmission with steady eyes. Unlike her colleagues, she didn't flinch at the sight of the crystalline beings or their demands. 20 years of military service had taught her that appearances meant little in the face of determination. They expect us to surrender, she stated flatly, addressing the assembled military leadership. Their message indicates they've done this thousands of times before. A smile touched her lips, but it held no warmth. They think they know war. They don't understand that humanity has been preparing for this moment since we first looked up at the stars. The room erupted in controlled activity. Operation Shadowfall, decades in development, began to unfold. While the Kelthid expected primitive weapons and disorganized resistance, humanity had spent generations preparing for this possibility. Unknown to their would-be conquerors, Earth's apparent technological limitations were a carefully crafted illusion. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, quantum computers spun up. In hidden bases across the planet, experimental weapons platforms emerged from their camouflaged shelters, and in orbit, thousands of microsatellites, invisible to conventional scanning, awakened to their true purpose. The Kelthid fleet arrived with the grandeur of conquerors, their crystalline ships refracting sunlight like massive diamonds in space. They positioned themselves in textbook invasion formation, expecting the usual pattern of resistance: futile attacks, desperate pleas, and ultimate submission. Admiral Sixtal was preparing his first bombardment when his tactical officer reported something strange. "Grand Admiral, we're detecting unusual energy signatures, patterns we've never seen before." Before he could respond, the first Kelthid ship vanished. Not destroyed, simply gone, as if it had never existed. Commander Torres watched the sensor feeds with grim satisfaction. "Quantum displacement drive," she explained to her staff. "We learn to fold space before we learn to leave our solar system." Sometimes the best innovations come from necessity rather than expansion. The Kelthid fleet's formation began to break as more ships disappeared. Their mighty weapons, capable of reducing planets to ash, proved useless against an enemy they couldn't detect or understand. Humanity's apparent primitive state had been their greatest weapon, while the Kelthid had grown stagnant in their superiority. Humanity had developed in ways they couldn't imagine. "Send the message," Torres ordered. The transmission was brief, broadcast on all frequencies in perfect Kelthid language. "You assumed we were primitive because we hadn't expanded beyond our solar system. You never asked why. Now you understand. We weren't trapped here. We were waiting, preparing. The universe laughed when you threatened humanity. Now it's our turn to smile." Admiral Sixtal watched in horror as his mighty fleet was systematically dismantled by an enemy he couldn't fight. The humans weren't just defending themselves. They were rewriting the rules of warfare. His species had evolved to be perfect warriors, but humanity had evolved to be perfect survivors. As the last Kelthid ships attempted to retreat, Torres allowed herself a moment of reflection. Humanity's first contact with alien life had come with threats of conquest, but it would end with a demonstration of human ingenuity. The universe had indeed laughed at humanity, right up until the moment humanity proved just how dangerous it could be to underestimate the species that had turned its own planetary isolation into its greatest strength. The day Earth revealed its true face to the galaxy, the laughter stopped. And in the silence that followed, A new era began, one where humanity would no longer hide its capabilities. The universe had tried to make humanity bow. Instead, humanity had stood up, and the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see what this supposedly primitive species would do next. The Kelthid Empire's response to their first defeat was predictably brutal. 3 massive battle fleets converged on the Sol system, their crystalline vessels darkening the space between stars. But this time, Admiral Zixtal wasn't in command. The Empire had appointed Grand Marshal Kvex, known across 1,000 worlds as the Planet Breaker. In his private chamber aboard the dreadnought Eternal Glory, Kvex studied footage from the first invasion attempt. His crystalline form pulsed with deep purple hues of contemplation. The humans had somehow developed technology that defied conventional physics. The Empire's solution was simple: overwhelming force. They would bring enough ships that even if half disappeared, the remainder would still overwhelm Earth's defenses. But humanity had been busy in the weeks since the first attack. Commander Elena Torres had been promoted to admiral, and she wasn't working alone. In a hidden facility beneath the Australian outback, Dr. Marcus Patel worked with a global team of scientists to perfect humanity's next surprise for their would-be conquerors. The quantum displacement drive was just the beginning. Patel explained to the assembled military leadership, his hands moving animatedly as he spoke. We've learned to manipulate not just space, but time itself on a microscopic scale. Each of our defensive platforms now exists in multiple moments simultaneously. Admiral Torres leaned forward, her expression intense. In plain English, Doctor. Patel smiled. They can bring 1,000,000 ships. We'll defeat them before they even arrive. The Kelthid battle fleets approached with brutal confidence, their weapons charged, their shields at maximum power. Kvex had studied human warfare, their primitive nuclear weapons, their quaint theories about space combat. He believed he understood their tricks now. His ships were equipped with quantum detection systems designed to prevent the disappearing act that had decimated the First Fleet. What he hadn't counted on was human creativity. The first sign that something was wrong came when his forward scouts reported their weapons were aging hundreds of years in seconds, becoming brittle and useless. Then entire ships began experiencing decades of wear in minutes. The mighty Kelthid fleet, pride of an empire that had lasted millennia, was literally aging to death. Temporal warfare, Patel explained to Torres as they watched the sensor feeds. We're not fighting them in space. We're fighting them in time. His eyes gleamed with the excitement of scientific breakthrough. Every weapon they fire experiences centuries before it reaches its target. Every shield they raise decays before it can form. The Kelthid response was chaos. Their mighty fleet, designed to shatter planets, found itself fighting an enemy that had mastered dimensions they hadn't even discovered. Ships that tried to retreat found themselves falling apart, their supposedly eternal crystalline hulls turned to ancient brittle shells by weapons that attacked time itself. In his command chamber, Kvex watched his mighty armada crumble. The humans weren't just defeating them, they were rewriting the fundamental rules of combat. His species had evolved to be perfect warriors in 3-dimensional space. Humanity had evolved to think beyond dimensions. Torres directed the defense with calculated precision. Earth's temporal platforms, hidden in pocket dimensions throughout the solar system, systematically aged sections of the Kelthid fleet into dust. It wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration of how far humanity had surpassed the very species that thought to conquer them. Send the message, Torres commanded, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's determination. The transmission reached every surviving Kelthid ship. Your empire has stood for thousands of years. We just showed you how meaningless time can be. Return with more ships, and we'll age them too. You thought space was your domain. We've moved beyond space, beyond time. This is your final warning. As the surviving Kelthid ships flood, their once pristine crystalline forms now dulled and ancient, humanity prepared for the next phase. They had revealed 2 of their technological achievements, quantum displacement and temporal manipulation. But these were just the beginning. Dr. Patel turned to Admiral Torres, his expression serious. "They'll return. The Empire's too proud not to." Torres nodded, a grim smile playing across her face. "Good, because now it's our turn to expand. The universe thought we were trapped in our solar system by technological limitations. Time to show them we were contained by choice, not necessity." As Earth's hidden fleets emerged from their dimensional pockets, humanity prepared to take its first steps into a galaxy that had gravely underestimated them. The universe had laughed at humanity's apparent primitiveness. Now it would watch in awe as humanity revealed just how advanced they had become while the rest of the galaxy wasn't looking. In the crystalline halls of the Kelthid High Command, panic had replaced certainty. For the first time in 3,000 years, their military reports contained a word they had never used before: retreat. The species that had evolved to be perfect warriors found themselves facing an enemy that refused to fight by any rules they understood. The Supreme Overseer, a being so ancient their crystalline form had developed layers like geological strata, demanded answers. How can a species confined to one system defeat our greatest fleets? Their voice resonated through the chamber, causing younger Kelthid to vibrate in fear. On the other side of the galaxy, humanity was done playing defense. Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the EDS Prometheus, Earth's first official interstellar warship. Unlike the crystalline aesthetics of Kelthid vessels, the Prometheus was practically invisible, its quantum-shifted hull existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Status report," Torres commanded, her voice steady as her crew prepared for humanity's first offensive operation beyond their solar system. Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez, her tactical officer, responded with practiced efficiency. "Temporal shields at full capacity. Dimensional drives ready. The Phantom Fleet is in position, Admiral." She paused, allowing herself a small smile. "They still haven't detected us." The Kelthid colony world of Kexhul Prime hung in space before them, its crystalline cities refracting starlight like a massive jewel. It was the Empire's primary shipyard, where they had constructed the fleets that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. The Kelthid believed it to be impregnable, protected by defenses that had never failed. They were about to learn another lesson about human ingenuity. Dr. Patel's voice came through the command channel from his laboratory back on Earth. "Remember, Admiral, the quantum resonance technology isn't just for hiding. Their crystalline technology has a fundamental weakness. It can shatter if hit with precisely the right frequency." Torres nodded, like an opera singer breaking a wine glass with their voice. "Exactly," Patel confirmed, "but on a planetary scale." The attack began without warning. The Prometheus and its ghost fleet, ships that existed more in possibility than in conventional reality, initiated what humanity had dubbed Operation Glass Storm. They didn't fire conventional weapons. Instead, they broadcast precisely calculated quantum frequencies. The effect was immediate and devastating. The mighty shipyards of Kexhul Prime began to vibrate. Crystal warships still under construction shattered like fine china. Defense platforms crumbled into sparkling dust. The Kelthid defenders, their very bodies resonating with the attack, found themselves unable to even move without risking their own crystalline forms fracturing. But Torres wasn't interested in destruction for its own sake. As the shipyards fell, human quantum commandos teleported throughout the facility, securing data cores and strategic intelligence. The Kelthid had spent thousands of years collecting knowledge about the galaxy. Now that knowledge would serve humanity. In the chaos, a young Kelthid scientist named Vexure made a decision that would change the course of the war. Instead of fighting, they approached the human forces with raised appendages. "Your species," they chittered in carefully learned English. "You don't just fight differently. You think differently. Perhaps that is what our empire needs." Torres herself met with Vexure aboard the Prometheus. The Kelthid scientist's crystalline form shimmered with nervous energy as they explained. "Our empire has stagnated. We became so convinced of our superiority that we stopped evolving. But you humans, in isolation, You achieved what we never imagined possible." The admiral considered these words carefully. This war had never been about destruction. It was about ensuring humanity's place in the galaxy. "Are you suggesting cooperation?" Vexer's form pulsed with affirmative colors. "There are others like me. Young ones who see that the Empire's way is ending. We've watched how you fight. Not with brute force, but with innovation. With ideas that break what we thought were the fundamental laws of reality." As the Prometheus secured its objectives, Torres began to see a larger possibility. Humanity had prepared for war, but perhaps they had discovered something more valuable: the opportunity to reshape galactic civilization itself. The message they sent to Earth was brief but historic. Phase 1 complete. Shipyards secured. But we may have found something more important than military victory. We found allies who want to build a different future. Back in the Kelthid High Command, the Supreme Overseer received the reports with growing dread. The humans hadn't just defeated their defenses, they had done the impossible. They had made Kelthid question the Empire itself. The war was evolving into something none had expected. It was no longer about conquest or defense. It was becoming a revolution that would reshape the very foundations of galactic society. And humanity, the species that had been dismissed as primitive, was leading the way. News of the Kexel Prime disaster spread through the Kelthid Empire like cracks through crystal. The unthinkable had happened, not just military defeat, but ideological contamination. The humans hadn't just destroyed a shipyard. They had planted seeds of revolution in the Empire's perfect crystalline order. In the aftermath, a new term entered the Kelthid language: human thought. It was used by the old guard as an insult, but among younger Kelthid, it became a whispered badge of honor. To think like a human meant to question, to innovate, to imagine possibilities beyond the rigid structures of imperial doctrine. Admiral Torres found herself navigating this cultural upheaval from the diplomatic deck of the Prometheus. Vexer had been joined by other Kelthid scientists, engineers, and even military officers, all fascinated by humanity's capacity to reshape reality itself. "Your quantum technologies," a Kelthid engineer named Kirash explained, their crystalline form vibrating with excitement. "They shouldn't be possible. You've broken laws of physics we thought were immutable." Dr. Patel, now operating from a new research facility on Mars, joined these discussions via quantum link. "We didn't break the laws of physics," he explained. "We just stopped assuming we knew all of them." Isolation taught humanity a crucial lesson. When you can't expand outward, you expand inward, into quantum realms, into dimensional physics, into the very fabric of space-time. The Supreme Overseer watched their empire fracture with growing fury. Reports flooded in from across Kelthid space. Colonies requesting autonomy, military units refusing orders, young Kelthid modifying their crystalline forms in ways that defied tradition. Humanity had introduced something more dangerous than any weapon. They had introduced change. On Earth, the United Earth Defense Force had evolved into the Human Expansion Initiative. Admiral Torres found herself working closely with diplomats and scientists as much as military strategists. "We're not just fighting a war anymore," she told her staff during a strategic briefing. "We're midwifing the birth of a new galactic order." Lieutenant Rodriguez, reviewing tactical data, spotted the pattern first. The Empire's responses are becoming predictable. They're so focused on maintaining control, they're losing their tactical flexibility. The Empire's desperation manifested in increasingly aggressive actions. They began shattering any crystals that showed signs of human thought, purging their own population in an attempt to maintain purity. But each act of violence only pushed more Kelthid toward the revolution. Vexer, now serving as a liaison between human forces and Kelthid reformers, brought disturbing news. The Supreme Overseer has ordered the use of the World Breaker fleet. They would rather destroy their own worlds than see them transformed. Torres received this information with grim determination. The World Breakers were the Empire's ultimate weapons, massive ships capable of shattering planets, But like everything Kelthid, they were based on crystalline technology, and humanity had learned to master crystals in ways the Empire never imagined. Dr. Patil unveiled humanity's response, the Harmony Protocol. Every crystal, whether in their ships, their weapons, or their bodies, resonates at specific frequencies, he explained. We've learned to broadcast frequencies that don't destroy, but synchronize. We can turn their own technology into a network for peace. The first test came at the Battle of New Dawn, where a world breaker approached a rebellious Kelthid colony. But when it tried to fire, something extraordinary happened. The quantum harmonics from human ships didn't shatter the crystal weapons. They transformed them. The destructive energy was redistributed, turned into a crystalline aurora that danced across space. Young Kelthid recorded and shared the image across the Empire. Their mightiest weapon, transformed into art. It became a symbol of everything humanity offered. Not destruction, but transformation. Not conquest, but evolution. The Supreme Overseer, watching their perfect empire dissolve into chaos, finally understood their mistake. They had spent millennia creating the perfect warriors, but humanity had become something far more dangerous. Perfect revolutionaries. Every attempt to crush them only spread their influence further. As the fourth phase of the conflict drew to a close, humanity had achieved something unprecedented. They hadn't just defeated an empire. They had transformed it. The question was no longer whether the Kelthid Empire would fall, but what would rise in its place. Admiral Torres, standing on the Prometheus's observation deck with Vexur, watched the crystalline aurora still shimmering in space. Your people shaped crystals into weapons, she said. We've learned to shape them into bridges. Vexur's form sparkled with new patterns, a physical manifestation of new ways of thinking. Perhaps that is why the universe placed our species in each other's path. You show us how to break patterns, while we show you new patterns to create. The war wasn't over, but its nature had fundamentally changed. The final conflict would not be fought with weapons, but with ideas, and in that arena, humanity had already won. The crystalline spires of the Kelthid homeworld Crickstal pierced the clouds like frozen lightning, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 suns. But for the first time in 3,000 years, they trembled, not from weapons or war, but from change. The Supreme Overseer had called for a final stand, a last desperate attempt to preserve the old order. Instead, they got a revolution. Admiral Elena Torres stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching history unfold. Beside her, Vexur's crystalline form pulsed with a mix of anxiety and hope. On screens around them, similar scenes played out across 1,000 worlds. The Kelthid Empire wasn't falling to human weapons. It was transforming through human ideas. Final reports confirm it, Lieutenant Rodriguez announced, her voice steady but tinged with awe. 87% of Kelthid colonies have declared independence from the Empire. They're calling for a new form of government, a crystalline federation. Dr. Patel's quantum projection appeared on the bridge, his expression thoughtful. The Harmony Protocol did more than we expected. It didn't just synchronize their technology. It showed them a new way of existing, each crystal maintaining its unique structure while resonating in harmony with the whole. The Supreme Overseer had barricaded themselves in the ancient spire, the seat of imperial power for millennia. Their last loyal forces stood ready for a final battle, their weapons charged, their crystalline forms rigid with traditional military discipline. They expected human warships, quantum attacks, temporal weapons. Instead, they faced their own people. Millions of young Kelthids surrounded the ancient spire, their forms shimmering with new patterns, crystalline structures that merged traditional forms with revolutionary ideas. They didn't attack. They simply stood, their bodies humming in harmony, resonating with frequencies learned from human scientists. The sound began low, barely perceptible. But it grew, crystal singing to crystal, a symphony of change that rippled through the very bedrock of Crickstal. The ancient spire didn't shatter. Instead, it transformed. Centuries of rigid patterns dissolved and reformed into something new, something that merged the mathematical perfection of Kelthid crystals with the infinite possibilities of human imagination. Admiral Torres received the transmission from the planet's surface. The Supreme Overseer has abdicated. The age of empire is over. The age of harmony begins. But even as victory was declared, humanity faced a new challenge. They had won not just a war, but the right to help shape the galaxy's future. The question now was, what would that future look like? We never wanted an empire. Torres addressed the first meeting of the Crystalline Federation Council, her words translated into harmonics for the Kelthid audience. Humanity spent centuries looking up at the stars, dreaming not of conquest, but of connection. We developed our technologies not to dominate, but to understand. Vexure, now serving as the Federation's chief scientific officer, added their own harmony to the discussion. And in doing so, you achieved something my people never could. You proved that true strength comes not from rigid perfection, but from endless adaptation. Not from uniformity, but from diversity. The next decade saw changes that transformed both civilizations. Human quantum science merged with Kelthid crystal technology, creating wonders neither species could have achieved alone. The dimensional barriers that had once hidden Earth became bridges to new realms of possibility. The crystalline ships that had once brought terror now carried explorers and scientists to the edges of known space. Dr. Patel's team, working with Kelthid researchers, made perhaps the most profound discovery of all. The quantum resonance that allowed humans to manipulate crystalline structures wasn't just a weapon or a tool. It was a fundamental property of consciousness itself. Thoughts, dreams, ideas, all resonated through the quantum fabric of reality, creating patterns more complex and beautiful than any rigid structure could contain. As the story of humanity's first interstellar conflict drew to a close, Admiral Torres found herself back where it all began, in orbit around Earth, watching her homeworld shine like a blue jewel in space. But now she saw it through new eyes, understanding that Earth's isolation hadn't been a limitation, but an incubator. Humanity had developed in unique ways precisely because they had been forced to look inward rather than outward. The universe had indeed laughed at humanity's apparent primitive state, but humans had learned long ago that the best response to laughter was not anger, but innovation. They had taken their place among the stars not through conquest, but through transformation, not through destruction, but through harmony. The final transmission from the newly formed Crystalline Federation Council was sent across all quantum frequencies, reaching every corner of known space. Let it be known that the age of empires is over. Today we begin a new chapter in galactic history, one written not in the language of war, but in the harmonics of cooperation. The universe laughed at humanity until we showed them a better way to sing. And in the vast depths of space, new frequencies began to resonate. The sound of two civilizations learning to create something greater than either could have imagined alone. The future wasn't just bright, it was crystalline clear.